Welcome to Babylon, a city of golden palaces and mighty walls, where the streets hum with life and energy. Merchants call out their wares, offering fine silk, shimmering jewels, and fragrant spices from faraway lands. Camels and donkeys trot through the bustling market, their packs overflowing with goods meant for the royal court. The Euphrates River winds through the city like a ribbon of silver, its cool waters glistening under the morning sun. The air is rich with the scent of baked bread, burning incense and sun-warmed stone, mingling with the distant clang of blacksmiths hammering bronze and the laughter of children playing near the temple gates. At the heart of this great kingdom stands a magnificent palace, its towering columns and intricate carvings gleaming under the golden sky. And within its vast halls, seated upon a throne of gold and ivory, is King Darius, ruler of the most powerful empire in the world. But this story is not about the king, it is about Daniel, a man of wisdom, honesty, and unshakable faith. A man who had risen above warriors, governors, and noblemen, earning the trust and admiration of the king himself. A man who, no matter what trials came his way, remained faithful to his God. But not everyone was pleased with Daniel's success. In the shadows, jealousy was growing, a plot was forming. And soon, the test of Daniel's faith would begin. Inside the grand palace, the air was thick with the scent of burning incense and polished marble floors. King Darius sat on his golden throne, his robe of deep purple trimmed with gold cascading over the steps of the throne. Around him, advisors, scribes, and noblemen stood in anticipation. With a nod, the king raised his hand and spoke. "Daniel has proven himself to be the most trustworthy and wise of all my governors. From this day forward, he shall oversee the entire kingdom, second only to me." Gasps rippled through the room. Some bowed their heads in respect, but others did not. In the back of the chamber, a group of men exchanged glances. Their faces were dark with anger, their hands clenched into fists. This was not the future they had planned. Daniel was not one of them. Something had to be done. Deep inside a hidden chamber where torchlight flickered against cold stone walls, a group of men sat around a large wooden table, their expressions grim. "We must find something against Daniel," one of them growled, his voice low and dangerous. "We have tried," another snapped, running a hand through his beard. "The man is too righteous. He does no wrong." Then, an older official leaned forward, his lips curling into a slow, sinister smile. "Daniel is faithful," he whispered. The others turned to him, intrigued. "Yes, he is faithful," the man continued, "but not to the king." The room fell silent. Then, as the plan unfolded in their minds, one by one, their frowns turned into wicked grins. The next morning, the jealous officials strode confidently into the throne room, their robes flowing behind them. They bowed low before King Darius, their voices coated in flattery. "O great king, you are the ruler of all lands. Should not the people worship only you?" King Darius, flattered by their words, sat up straighter, listening. "Let it be law, O king," another official added, his voice smooth as silk. "For the next 30 days, no one shall pray to any god or man except you. And if they disobey—" The officials exchanged knowing glances before delivering the final blow. "They shall be thrown into the lion's den." King Darius, blinded by their words, smiled and took his royal seal. With one press of wax and gold, the law was made, and not even the king could undo it. Daniel sat in his chamber, the evening light spilling through the tall, arched windows. The law had been signed. It was now forbidden to pray to anyone except the king. A choice stood before him. Would he hide? Would he bow to the fear that gripped the kingdom? or would he continue to serve the one true God? Daniel took a deep breath. Slowly, he walked to his open window overlooking the city. The wind rustled his robe as he knelt to pray, just as he had done every day before. Outside, in the dark alleyway below, shadows moved. The jealous officials watched. Their trap had been set, and Daniel had just walked into it. The doors burst open. Palace guards dressed in bronze armor stormed into Daniel's chamber, their torches casting long shadows on the walls. "You have broken the law, Daniel," the captain declared. Daniel stood, his face calm and unshaken. "I have broken no law greater than my God's," he replied. The guards grabbed his arms, leading him away. And as they dragged him through the streets of Babylon, the officials watched from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with victory. The lion's den was a deep, dark pit carved into the earth. The air was thick with the scent of dust and wild animals. Inside, the lions paced, their massive forms moving like silent shadows. Their golden eyes flickered in the dim light, their tails flicking impatiently. Above, King Darius stood at the edge, his face pale. He had been tricked. He had let jealousy blind him. And now, Daniel, his most trusted servant, was to be thrown to the lions. "May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you," the king whispered. Then the heavy stone was rolled into place, and Daniel was sealed inside. That night, King Darius did not eat. He did not sleep. He refused music. He refused comfort. He paced his chamber, staring out at the darkened city, thinking of only one thing. Was Daniel still alive? Inside the lion's den, Daniel knelt, his hands lifted in prayer. Then a bright light filled the cavern. A mighty angel of the Lord appeared, his robes glowing like fire. The lions, once hungry and restless, suddenly grew calm. Their growls faded, their sharp claws retracted. One by one they lay down beside Daniel, their great heads resting against the stone floor. Daniel watched in awe. God had saved him. As soon as the first light of dawn touched the sky, King Darius ran to the lion's den. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God saved you?" For a moment, silence. Then a voice echoed back. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths," King Darius shouted with joy. Daniel was alive. A hushed silence fell over the crowd gathered outside the lion's den. The moment Daniel's voice echoed from the darkness, the entire palace courtyard froze. King Darius stood at the entrance, his hands gripping the edge of the stone wall, his breath caught in his throat. And then he laughed, not a small laugh, not a nervous chuckle, a great booming laugh of relief, full of joy and wonder. "Pull him up at once," the king shouted, waving to his guards. The soldiers hurried forward, lowering strong ropes into the den. Inside, Daniel grabbed hold. His hands were firm, his arms strong. And as the guards pulled him up, the morning sun bathed him in golden light. He rose from the darkness, and when he finally stepped onto solid ground, the crowd gasped. There was not a single scratch on him, not a tear in his robe, not a bruise, nor a mark, because God had protected him. The moment Daniel's feet touched the earth, King Darius rushed forward, gripping his shoulders, staring at him in awe. His eyes searched Daniel's face as if expecting some sign of struggle, of pain. But there was none. Daniel's face was calm, his eyes were clear, his heart was whole. The king swallowed hard. "Your God is truly the living God, Daniel," he whispered. And in that moment, he knew. This was no ordinary man, this was a man of faith, and his God was real. Not far from where the crowd gathered, the jealous officials stood frozen. Their faces, once full of smug triumph, were now drained of color. Their plan had failed. They had expected silence. They had expected death. Instead, they had witnessed a miracle. The same lions they had trusted to tear Daniel apart had done nothing. The same fate they had designed for their enemy had been reversed by a power greater than their own. And now the king's eyes turned toward them, slowly, fiercely, with understanding and with wrath. The king's voice was low. It vibrated with anger, heavy and full, like a distant thunder rolling over the desert. The officials took a step back. "You have deceived me," King Darius continued. His voice rose. "You have plotted against an innocent man." He took a step forward. His purple robe flowed behind him, the weight of his fury making the air thick. "You have tried to destroy a man who did no wrong." The officials were trapped, just as they had trapped Daniel. "Guards!" The king raised his hand. The men stiffened. They knew what was coming, and this time there would be no escape. The crowd in the palace courtyard watched in stunned silence. The jealous officials, who had once whispered in dark corners, who had smirked in triumph as Daniel was led to the lion's den, now stood pale and trembling. King Darius lifted his chin, his voice carrying across the square. "You who have tried to destroy Daniel, you will now face the fate you set for him." The royal guard stepped forward, their armor clinking softly in the hush of the morning. The officials looked around wildly, their chests rising and falling with panicked breaths. "No, wait!" one of them gasped. But it was too late. The guards seized them. Stripped of their robes of power, they were dragged toward the lion's den, the same pit they had intended for Daniel. As they were thrown inside, the massive stone was rolled back into place. And this time, the lions did not lie down. The crowd in the palace courtyard watched in stunned silence. The morning air was still. The city of Babylon, which had been alive with whispers and doubts about Daniel's God, now stood in silent awe. The king turned, facing the people. He climbed the steps of his grand palace balcony, where the entire city could see him. With a deep breath, he raised his arms and his voice rang out, "Let it be known throughout all my kingdom." People gathered in the streets. The markets fell silent. All eyes turned to the king, who had witnessed a miracle. "That the God of Daniel is the one, true living God," a murmur rippled through the crowd. "He rescues and delivers." The people leaned in closer, hanging on to every word. "He performs miracles in heaven and on earth. He shut the mouths of lions, and his kingdom will never be destroyed." And just like that, the name of Daniel's God was known throughout the land. From that day forward, Daniel's place in the kingdom was greater than ever. King Darius honored him, not just as a trusted advisor, but as a man of faith, one who had faced death and walked out unscathed. For many years, Daniel continued to serve in the palace, but no longer was he just a governor, a ruler, a wise counselor. He was now a living testimony, a man who had been tested by fire and proven unshakable, a man whose faith had not only saved him, but had changed the heart of a king. And so the story of Daniel and the lion's den was not just about a man, it was about faith, it was about courage, and it was about trusting God even in the hardest times. Lessons to remember, checkmark. Trusting God even when things seem impossible, Daniel never doubted that God would protect him. Do what is right, no matter the cost. Daniel didn't stop praying even when it was dangerous. God is always in control. The lions, the officials, even the king, everything was in God's hands. Faith is more powerful than fear. No matter how big the problem, God is always bigger. As the years passed, Daniel often stood on the palace balcony, looking over the golden city of Babylon. The same city that once tried to silence him, now honored his God. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, and Daniel closed his eyes, a peaceful smile on his face, because through it all, God had never left his side.